Gotta give everybody just a couple minutes to come on in here and get online, but it's good to see everybody here tonight. Welcome. How's everybody doing?
Blessed.
Amen.
Alive.
Amen. Glad to see you guys back. We got the Butler family back tonight. They had COVID and they are healed. Praise the Lord. Where's Shelly?
She's out in Maricopa doing a child contact.
But she's doing better?
Yes, very well.
Good. Good. That is good to hear. We got a few prayer requests tonight. And I know we probably got people trickling in here and trickling online, but just want to share a few prayer requests. Phil and Susan Hunt, be in prayer for them because Phil, they've made the decision to put Phil in hospice instead of doing an aggressive chemo treatment. They decided to move him to hospice just because it's doctors think it's unlikely the chemo is going to do a whole lot at this point. So yeah, it's just a crazy thing. So pray for both of them. Pray for Phil, pray for Susan. They navigate. Yeah, may peace be with them. I just can't even imagine. But do we have any prayer requests here tonight? Yeah.
I have my mother-in-law in Texas. She got put in hospice too.
Hospice, pretty recently.
Yes.
Your mother-in-law in Texas, you said? Okay. I'm sorry, that's never easy.
No.
Never easy. Yeah.
Pray for us as the Butler family as we are going on our vacation this weekend, and pray that we're safe. We fill up and great for it, and we have no issues along the way.
Absolutely. Where are you guys headed?
We're going to Texas this weekend, and then for the rest of it, we're going to drive up to Minnesota.
Okay. That's quite a journey.
Yeah.
It's a long road trip.
Plan.
Absolutely. All right. Any other prayer requests tonight? Come on in. Any other prayer requests tonight? Yeah. Well, continue to pray for Telma. She grieves the loss of her son. We're doing a celebration Saturday, 5 p.m. down at the park down there in Florence. But that's tough. But the Lord's holding her up, holding her close. And then her brother had pull up my notes here, was hospitalized as well a few days ago. So be praying for him as well for recovery. I have it in front of me. I don't have it anymore, but anyway, good to see each of you tonight. I think, do we have anybody online tonight? Hello, all those of you online, good to see you. Welcome.
Tell them I'm working on the sound.
Oh, okay. Can they hear me?
Well, through the speakers, but...
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. Just trying to find my notes here. Well, we are in Daniel chapter 5 tonight, so feel free, if you have a Bible or a Bible app on your phone, feel free to jump over there to Daniel chapter 5, and if you missed the last few weeks, just read Daniel's chapter 1 through 4 really fast. Maybe all caught up. Yeah, so Talma's brother, Michael, is back in the hospital, and I don't have any other updates than that. That's from several days ago. Pray for our sister. She's been going through a lot this past couple of weeks. All right, Daniel chapter. So Daniel chapter 5, we kind of hit the fast forward button from the last 4 chapters of Daniel. I don't know exactly how many years has passed, but the setting of chapter 5 occurs in 539 BC. Okay, so this is when the city of Babylon falls to the Persian Empire. Okay, I don't know if anybody's familiar with all that history, but that's when it occurs. And so historically, the fall of the Babylonian Empire marked the end of Babylon kind of dominating everything, the known world at the time. And so what we see now is we see the Persian Empire start to ascend. So remember King Nebuchadnezzar from the last few weeks? He's gone, and the Babylonian Empire is going down with him. The Persian Empire has taken over, and now we find a new king. So King Nebuchadnezzar is no longer with us. We find a new king named King Belshazzar. And the book of Daniel kind of goes back and forth during different time periods. So what we're doing now from chapters 1 through 4 is we're hitting the fast forward button in chapter 5. So there's a new king in town, and there's a new empire in town. It's the Persian Empire. And we know that the Medes and the Persians had defeated the Babylonian army, and so we see King Belshazzar take over. Now, Belshazzar was not a very well-liked or very well-respected king. I don't know all of the historical details, but he wasn't well-liked or well-respected. I was trying to pull up on my phone the list of worst U.S. presidents, because he would be right there with him. Buchanan, Harding, Johnson, Pierce, Fillmore, Harrison, Tyler, Ulysses S. Grant, Taylor, and they put George W. Bush. Of course, everybody has their own opinion on all that, but...
Aren't they missing one?
What's that?
Aren't they missing one already?
Probably. I don't know what... this is probably not very updated, right?
No.
Everyone has their own opinion on that, by the way. So we're not going to get started down that trail.
No.
But that's just what this survey. So this was a survey done where they surveyed, I don't know how many thousands of different people, and this is what people marked as the worst president. So some of them maybe you've never heard of, and maybe that's why. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, Belshazzar, he would be on that list, right? He was not very popular. He was not very well liked. And it was said that he did not rule the kingdom very well. Poor leadership. Poor leadership. So this was Belshazzar. He was not very popular. And so in Daniel chapter 5, the story opens by King Belshazzar throwing a party. And a lot of historians think he was throwing this party as a series of parties to get people to like him. If you party with somebody, maybe you'll like them better. I don't know. But so many historians say that the purpose of this party that we see in Daniel chapter 5 was so Belshazzar could gain popularity. Okay, but as for our friend Daniel, he's still there. He's still in the kingdom. Was the Babylonian Empire, now it's the Persian Empire. Daniel's still there. I don't think he's still in his position. At least that's what the Bible seems to imply. Daniel was in charge of all the wise men. I don't think he had that position right now, but at least that's what it seems to imply. So the Persian Empire had taken over. Daniel's still here. And the thing that we're reminded of tonight again is that God is in control. We're going to see it again in Daniel chapter 5. God is in control. God wasn't just in control of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now God is in control of King Belshazzar and the Persian Empire. And so, we look at all these empires, Babylon, Persia, all these empires, the Roman Empire, they're no longer existent, right? They're no longer existent. And it just serves as a reminder that God is everlasting. God is eternal. And these great empires that seem so great at the time, they're no longer there. So we're reminded that God is eternal, God is everlasting, and God is in control. We serve a sovereign, just God who is in control of everything. And so what we're going to see tonight is we're going to see God speak to King Belshazzar. And it's not pretty. It's not pretty. And then we're going to see Daniel actually interpret what the thing that he saw, what it means. Okay, so this is where we're at tonight. Let's look at Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. We'll start with just verse 1. Here's what's happening in chapter 5. Many years later, okay, so continuing on from Daniel chapter 4, we don't know how many years, but many years later, new king, King Belshazzar, gave a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles
and he drank wine with them. Okay, so like we said a minute ago, Daniel chapter 5 opens with Belshazzar throwing a very big party. And the Bible says the party had how many people? 1,000 people. That's a big party. Ever been to a party that big? That's a big party. 1,000 people. There was feasting, there was drinking. And like I said, many historians think the purpose of this feast and similar feasts were so that people would fall in love with King Belshazzar. He wasn't very popular, poor leadership skills, but he thought if he could throw a party, people would like him. Okay? I don't know if that was true, but that's what he thought. If I could throw a good party, maybe people will like me and respect me more. So he invites all the nobles, all the leaders, all the governors, the important people, the celebrities. He invites 1,000 of them out for a party. And he's eating and he's drinking and they're having a crazy time. All right, let's read verses 2 and 3. While Belshazzar was drinking the wine, so he was a little intoxicated, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver cups that his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar had taken, check this out, from the temple in Jerusalem. Belshazzar wanted to drink from them with his nobles, his wives, and his concubines. Verse 3. So they brought these gold cups, taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. So what's he doing here? What's he doing here? He brings in these gold cups that King Nebuchadnezzar, remember him back in the day, King Nebuchadnezzar had brought back with him from when he conquered Jerusalem, when he conquered God's people. Remember way back then, we talked about that in Daniel's chapters 1 through 4. King Nebuchadnezzar conquered God's people, and they brought them as exiles into Babylon. Remember that? Well, they brought with them spoils of victory. And part of these spoils were these gold cups taken from God's temple. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar kept these cups safe. He actually put them in his own temple as kind of a sacred, almost like if you had fancy china, like sacred, like up on the top shelf for display, as a decoration, as a memorial. But what does Belshazzar want to do here? What does Belshazzar want to do with these sacred cups? Okay, he wants to drink with them. He wants to use them for drinking. It'd be like having really expensive, memorable china, fancy china, that you just have a big 4th of July party and just pull it out and start drinking. It doesn't make any sense. But that's what he was doing here. He brings these cups out, and King Nebuchadnezzar had treated these special objects with respect. King Belshazzar, the new king, he's showing contempt for Israel's God. He's saying, I don't care about their God. I don't respect their God. I'm going to take these cups because I'm arrogant and I'm king, and we're gonna drink wine out of them. Okay, that's what's happening here. These cups were seen as sacred by God's people. Okay, but the king's using them as party cups. And maybe you have some valuable china, so it's kind of the same idea. It's a sign of disrespect. It's a sign of disrespect. All right, let's look at verse 4. While they drank from them, they praised their idols made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So it gets worse. Not only were he and the nobles drinking from the cups that were supposed to be sacred, they were drinking and worshiping idols with them. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. They were worshiping idols. They were worshiping fake gods. He brings in something sacred, and he mixes it with the sinful. He brings in something sacred, and he uses it for something sinful. Okay? Many historians think Belshazzar did this to impress his nobles. Why would that be impressive? Because it's like, well, I didn't conquer, but the guy before me conquered God's people, and now I'm so big and powerful, I'm going to drink wine out of their sacred holy cups. It was a sign of disrespect. He was being arrogant and trying to impress his nobles, by disrespectfully drinking out of these cups. Collecting idols and collecting sacred objects was something that people people did when they would conquer, or that kings did when they would conquer another tribe or another nation. So that was normal. Nebuchadnezzar did that. But here, Belshazzar goes one step further, and he's almost showing off. He's saying, you know what? Look at this silly little cup of the God, of the king, of the people that I conquered, I'm going to drink wine, and we're going to worship our gods with these cups. How do you think God felt about that? He's showing off. Do you think the story is going to end well for King Belshazzar, by the way? Maybe you've read ahead. I don't know. You think it's going to... You know, don't you?
No, I'm definitely.
You might be right. You might be right. Let's look at verse 5. This is crazy. Suddenly, they saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. The king himself saw the hand as it wrote. Verse 6. And his face turned pale with fright. His knees knocked together in fear, and his legs gave way beneath him. Don't mess with God, right? Don't mess with God. We don't know all the exact details of what was going on here, but he saw a human hand, and everybody else saw it too. And this was during the party. He saw a human hand begin to write something on the wall of the king's palace. The Bible says it was right by the lampstand, so everybody it was obviously nighttime. Everybody could see it because it was illuminated by the lampstand. How would you respond if you were doing something you shouldn't be and that happened to you? It's crazy. So everyone saw this happen. The nobles saw this happen. Scary thing to witness. How did the king respond? He was terrified, right? He was so terrified, the Bible says his face turned pale. He was so terrified, the Bible said his knees knocked together and his legs gave out beneath him. You ever been that scared? Maybe you have, where you just can't stand up, where you just can't function, where your face gets flush. Yeah, he was pretty scared. What would you do if that happened to you? Well, yeah, it's like a bear. It's like you're hiking in the woods and a big bear is right in front of you, or like a big wolf or something. Be freaked out. So we can't blame them, right? I mean, we can't blame them for that response. We'd be pretty scared too, right? Yeah, that's just a scary thing. Okay, if a hand started writing on our living room wall, am I seeing things? You're not seeing things because all the nobles saw it too. Everybody saw it. Okay, so what would you do if you were King Belshazzar? What should you do in this scenario? What would you do? Let's look. Here's what he does. Verse 7. The king shouted for the enchanters, astrologers, and fortune tellers to be brought before him. He said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever can read this writing and tell me what it means will be dressed in purple robes of royal honor and will have a gold chain placed around his neck. He will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom. So what's Belshazzar do? He panics and he shouts. Right in the middle of the party. The party is probably not really a party anymore. Everyone's probably pretty terrified. Maybe some of them went home. I don't know. Or maybe they were hanging around to see what happens next. Never been to a party like that. The Bible says here, out of a sense of panic, the king is trying to figure out what this means. So he turns to the astrologers, the fortune tellers, the wise men. Remember, Daniel was kind of the head of those people back during the Babylonian Empire. But it doesn't seem like Daniel's in this position currently. Not 100% sure about that, but it doesn't seem like he is. And King Belshazzar here is so desperate. He's saying, this is so terrifying, and I'm so desperate to know what this vision means. Whoever can tell me will become the third highest ruler in the entire Persian Empire. That's pretty significant. Will become the third highest ruler in the entire Persian Empire. So this was a big deal. This was a big deal. Let's look at verse 8. Here's what happens in verse 8. But when all the king's wise men had come in, the Bible says, none of them could read the writing or tell him what it meant. So much for that plan, right? But of course they couldn't, right? I mean, they're dealing with God. The astrologers, the fortune tellers, they worshipped idols. They worshipped fake gods. Everything they did was all show. There was probably a little witchcraft and demonic activity mixed in there, but it was all a big show. There wasn't any power behind it. This was the hand of God writing on the wall. These guys had no idea what it meant. They had no idea. They had no real power. It's all just games. It's all just show. It's all just witchcraft. Okay. So you're King Belshazzar. What do you do now? What do you do now? The smartest, wisest magicians couldn't figure it out. What do you do? What do you do? Let's look at verse 9. Here's what he does. He starts freaking out. So the king grew even more alarmed, and his face turned pale. It was already pale. Maybe it's more pale. His nobles, too, were shaken. So now everybody's pretty scared. I mean, they thought they'd stay for the party, and whoa, there's a magic trick on the wall, and, now it's pretty freaky, because the wise men, they have no idea. The astrologers, the fortune tellers, they have no idea. The Bible says they were shaken. They were freaked out. They were afraid. They were terrified. The Bible says that the king's face turned pale again. He's scared. He's terrified. This is what happens when you mess with God, This is what happens when you mess with God. So it's quite the party. Think about it. The king was showing off these really cool cups. Remember that? He was showing off, hey, my predecessor defeated the Jews and Yahweh God, and look at these cool gold cups we got. Let's drink wine out of them and worship our idols. That turned around quickly, didn't it? So these people who he was trying to impress are like, that's the opposite now. They're like, wow, this king is about to go down. This is crazy. So, in drunken foolishness, we find King Belshazzar take out the gold cups, use them to impress his nobles, and party with them, because we conquered the Jews. We conquered God's people. Let's party with the holy cups. But it didn't go so well. God showed up, right? And he said, excuse me? What are you doing? And for God, it wasn't about the cups, I don't think. For God, it was about the fact that they were disrespecting God and disrespecting God's people. And God doesn't like to be disrespected. God, in fact, demands that he's worshipped. And so Belshazzar is doing the opposite here. He's not only not worshiping God, he's disrespecting God. And it's probably not going to end well for him. Okay? Now God's saying, you think you're going to disrespect the God of the universe? So we see God here bringing the king down a couple notches. The king is freaking out. The nobles are all watching this. So much for a great, powerful king, right? Let's look at verse 10. All right. But when the queen mother heard what was happening, she hurried to the banquet hall. She said to Belshazzar, long live the king. Don't be so pale and frightened. So who's the queen mother? Could have been Nebuchadnezzar's wife. It could have been Belshazzar's mother. We're not entirely sure, but she was an important woman, okay? She barged in, though. Nobody typically barges in on a king. But he was just kind of whatever. He wasn't that well respected. But what does she say? She says, long live the king. That's ironic, isn't it? You think he's going to live very long after this? The irony, right? The irony. All right, here's what the queen says, verse 11. She tells him this, there's a man in your kingdom who has it within him, the spirit of the holy gods. During Nebuchadnezzar's reign, this man was found to have insight, understanding, and wisdom like that of the gods. Your predecessor, the king, your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, made him chief over all the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and fortune tellers of Babylon. So, what did she say? She said, there's a man in your kingdom that might be able to fix this. Might be able to fix this. King Nebuchadnezzar, he put him in charge of everybody. Doesn't it seem like he's still in charge of everybody because Belshazzar wasn't familiar with him? And so she says, since none of your wise men can help you, why don't you call on this man to help? Verse 12. She continues in verse 12. This man Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, that's very similar to Belshazzar, very confusing, but they both derive from the god Baal. Belteshazzar, a.k.a. Daniel, has exceptional ability and is filled with divine knowledge and understanding. He can interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So we see again Daniel being called for. He was probably older than a teenager at this point. But remember, Daniel was a teenager when he first got to Babylon. Look at the way that God used him through chapters 1 through 4. God's not done with him yet. He's using him again in chapter 5 with a new king under a new empire. Okay? It's just incredible how God continues to use us. But Daniel's being called up again to give another interpretation for another king. Verse 13. So Daniel was brought in before the king. The king asked him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles brought from Judah by my predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar?" When I read that, it almost sounds disrespectful, doesn't it? None of his wise men could figure out what any of this meant. So Daniel's being brought in. Daniel agrees. And how does he start off the conversation? Are you one of those exile people that my predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered and brought back? It's almost like a sign of disrespect, right? I don't know, maybe not, but it doesn't seem very respectful, He continues on, verse 14. I have heard that you have the spirit of the gods within you, and that you are filled with insight, understanding, and wisdom. My wise men and enchanters have tried to read the words on the wall and tell me their meaning, but they can't do it. Verse 16. I am told that you can give interpretations and solve difficult problems. If you can read these words and tell me their meaning, you will be clothed in purple robes of royal honor, and you will have a gold chain placed around your neck. You will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom. King's a little skeptical, but none of the wise men could figure it out. So he says, why not, Daniel? If you can do it, you're going to be the third highest ruler. Familiar story for Daniel. He'd been a high ruler in the Babylonian Empire as well. How does Daniel respond here? What do you think? Verse 17. Daniel answered the king, keep your gifts or give them to someone else, but I will tell you what the writing means. Daniel, he speaks with a sense of authority here. He speaks with a sense of authority. He knows that God will give him that ability to interpret that writing. He's speaking with a sense of faith, King Belshazzar was probably pretty offended by what Daniel said, by the way. Back then, it was very customary to accept a gift as a reward, and by refusing to accept it was like a slap in the face. It's like you give somebody a Christmas card. They say, you know what, I don't even want this. It's kind of like a slap in the face. And Daniel, and this is a big slap in the face because the gift is so large, the reward is so large that it's like, wouldn't anyone want that? Daniel's like, no, I've been there, done that. I serve the God of the universe. Truthfully, I don't think Daniel, I think he was like everybody else. I don't think he really liked Belshazzar that much. I don't think he really respected Belshazzar that much. And he's like, you can keep the robe and the position, and I'll tell you what the writing means, but I don't want to be part of a dying man's kingdom. Maybe he thought that. I don't know. But yeah, he just didn't want to be identified with King Belshazzar. Nobody liked him. Okay, so let's look at verse 18. verses 18 and 19. Here's what Daniel says. Here is Daniel's response. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave sovereignty, majesty, glory, and honor to your predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar. He made him so great that people of all races and nations and languages trembled before him in fear. He killed those he wanted to kill and spared those he wanted to spare. He honored those he wanted to honor and disgraced those he wanted to disgrace. Okay, so does that sound familiar? This is kind of a repeat from last week, right? Remember chapter 4 last week where Nebuchadnezzar is portrayed as this ruler over the whole world. So it's kind of a repeat. Daniel is reiterating the fact that King Nebuchadnezzar was put in that place by God. Remember the theme from last week? The theme from last week is that God put King Nebuchadnezzar in his position and God could take it away, and he did, right? And so he's reiterating this fact. All the peoples and nations were under Nebuchadnezzar's authority, but God put him there, right? God put him there. The birds, the fields, everybody gathered under the branches of the tree in the dream. Remember the big tree in the dream last week? And King Nebuchadnezzar had the ability to influence so many lives, but who gave him that ability? God. God gave him that ability. We can never forget that every blessing we have is from God. We can never forget that every position we're put in is from God. God put us there. We should never forget that every king, every governor, every leader, every president was put there by God, was allowed to be put there by God. You may not agree with it, you may not vote for it, but God allowed it. And so the idea here is that God put King Nebuchadnezzar in authority, and God will take him out of authority. God put King Belshazzar in authority, and God can take King Belshazzar and bring him to the grave. That's the idea here. Let's read verses 20 and 21. So Daniel continues on. He's talking about King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel continues on. But when his heart and mind were puffed up with arrogance, he was brought down from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven from human society. Talking about King Nebuchadnezzar. He was given the mind of a wild animal, and he lived among the wild donkeys. Remember from last week? He ate grass like a cow. He was drenched with the dew of heaven until he learned that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of the world and appoints anyone he desires to rule over them. That's quite a thing to say to a king, isn't it? And Daniel's just speaking out in faith. He's not a timid teenager anymore. He's seen God rescue people from burning furnaces, you know? He's seen God give him visions and dreams and interpret dreams. Daniel's saying, Belshazzar, he's nobody compared to God. And so he kind of tells Belshazzar, puts him in his place, you know? Kind of puts him in his place here. And so this is last week. This is the thing that happened last week to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel's reminding Belshazzar what happened to Nebuchadnezzar back in the day. And he's saying, you're not God, you're only a king, right? Even the great King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel says here, even the great King Nebuchadnezzar, and he was so respected throughout history. He was so respected throughout the kingdom. Even King Nebuchadnezzar was brought down by God. The most powerful man in known history at the time was brought down by God. That's what he's saying to Belshazzar. God is in control. God appoints. God is in control of the world. Verse 22. You are his successor, O Belshazzar, and you knew all this, yet you have not humbled yourself. Okay, so Daniel says, you haven't learned what Nebuchadnezzar learned. Remember last week in chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, he did humble himself, right? God brought him down like he does to us, and he humbled himself. But Belshazzar was drinking out of the cups, right? That was like the opposite of humility. Daniel says, the story of King Nebuchadnezzar taught you nothing. Daniel says, you knew all of this. You knew all this happened to Nebuchadnezzar, but you're still full of yourself. You're still arrogant. You still don't worship the Most High God. And not only that, but you're drinking out of the sacred cups. What's wrong with you? Didn't you learn from Nebuchadnezzar? Apparently not. All right, let's look at verse 23 and 24. For you have proudly defied the Lord of heaven, and have had these cups from his temple brought before you. You and your nobles and your wives and concubines have been drinking wine from them, while praising gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Gods that neither see, nor hear, nor know anything at all. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. Verse 24. So God has sent this hand to write this message. How do you think Belshazzar is feeling right about now? What does Daniel say? He's saying you took the real God's sacred cups and you're worshiping fake gods with them. So God sent this hand to write a message to you on the wall. His face was probably pretty pale, getting pretty pale, right? He was pretty freaked out. Okay, so there's three different things that Daniel's condemning him of here, okay? Number one, you took the cups from the temple. You disrespected them by drinking them. Number two, you worship and praise false gods, fake gods, and idols with these sacred cups. Number three, and the worst one, you refuse to honor the one true God. You refuse to honor the one true God who controls your life, who controls your destiny, right? So God has sent the hand to write the message. What is the message? Let's read verses 25 through 28. This is the message that was written. Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. This is what these words mean. Mene means numbered. God has numbered the days of your reign and has brought it to an end. Verse 27. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have not measured up. Verse 28. Parsin means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Okay, so these are the words on the wall. This is the writing on the wall. These are the words. Three different things for King Belshazzar, okay? There's three different things. Number one, Mene, which means numbered. What does this hand writing on the wall mean? It means your days are numbered, King Belshazzar. Your days are numbered. You're on the throne now, but not for long. Okay, number two, Tekel. This word means weighed. Okay, so imagine someone weighing a precious bag of metals, gold or silver, to determine their value. You didn't measure up. You didn't weigh enough. You don't have enough value. That's what that means. You've fallen short. Number three, Parsin, which comes from two different words. One means divided, one means Persia. It means the empire will be divided between the Medes and the Persians. Okay? So this writing on the wall, it sort of paints a picture, doesn't it? Sort of paints a picture. What we see is counting, we see weighing, sorting of products to determine value. So compared to King Nebuchadnezzar, King Belshazzar does not measure up. Compared to the great King Nebuchadnezzar, King Belshazzar does not measure up. He's much worse. He's much worse. And because of that, King Belshazzar's days are numbered, and his empire will be divided between the Medes and the Persians, okay? So that's what this means. That's Daniel's interpretation of the writing on the wall. Okay? Not good news, right? Not good news for King Belshazzar. How would you respond if you were the king? How would you respond? You know? How did Nebuchadnezzar respond when he got the bad news? You remember? Yeah, he repented, right? He fell down and worshiped God. What does Belshazzar do? Let's look at verse 29. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was dressed in purple robes. A gold chain was hung around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom, even though he didn't want it. I don't know how he got it. He didn't want it. I don't know, but it happened. Belshazzar follows through. He gives him the robe, the chain, the promotion. But there's something missing here, isn't there? You know? There's something missing. Because we remember King Nebuchadnezzar responded time and time again. When King Nebuchadnezzar saw God's miracles, he responded time and time again with worship, with repentance. Remember? And King Nebuchadnezzar wasn't perfect. He still worshipped other gods, but he said, Daniel, your God is better than all the other gods. I worship your God. Your God's the greatest of all the gods. He was still a polytheist, but he said, your God is the greatest of all the gods. Belshazzar doesn't do that though, right? Now, King Nebuchadnezzar was a little crazy. Maybe he wasn't fully devoted to God, but he always responded by worshiping the Most High God. He always responded by saying, Daniel, your God is better than all my gods, right? We don't see that happen here. I think it's important. I really do. Belshazzar gets the interpretation from Daniel, but he doesn't change his ways. And Daniel said it all, didn't he? He said it all. God's in control. God appoints. God takes down. He heard it all. Belshazzar hears it all, but he doesn't repent. He doesn't worship God as king. He's stubborn. He's arrogant. And he's doomed. Let's look at verse 30. That very night, Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed. Verse 31. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Okay, so the story ends, the chapter ends in judgment. The message on the wall was fulfilled that very night. And historically, Belshazzar was killed, and the Persians took over the kingdom. Historians believe this event occurred in 539 BC. Okay? Historically. What is the theme here in chapter 5? What do you take away from this? I mean, we know every knee will bow before the Lord. We're reminded of that tonight. And that God appoints leaders and rulers, whoever He wants to. God is sovereign. God is in control. We still got a little time, so if anybody has something they want to share, we'd love to hear it. And we'll open up the microphone here, and we'll open up the online forum. If anybody online has something they'd like to say, please write it in the comments, and we can read it out loud here. But what do you get from chapter 5? How are you encouraged by chapter 5? How are you challenged? What did God speak to you personally as we were reading this? How might you apply some of this to your life today? Love to hear your thoughts.
It came to me in a way that it just shows that there are men in this world, especially back then, that were arrogant and didn't see past what lies in front of them. Certain men will believe a stating or a dream like Nebuchadnezzar, but Belshazzar did not believe what he saw before his eyes. He thought that this didn't exist, and he just thought he was the powerful king and ignored everyone. And that is why he was murdered, because of the fact that he was arrogant.
That's so true. Arrogance, pride, right? And you're absolutely right. We see it today. You're absolutely right. And so I think that's a good application right there, because we deal with pride. You know, you mentioned men. Maybe men are more stubborn. I don't know. Are men more stubborn than women? I don't know. But the idea is we deal with pride, right? Especially men, right? We deal with pride. We deal with pride. All right, we got any online comments? All right, everybody online, leave us a comment. We want to know that you're here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Daniel chapter 5. Love to hear from you. What do you get from this tonight? What are you encouraged by? What are you challenged by? What do you take away from this? How can we apply this to our lives today? Love to hear your thoughts.
Disrespect is something that happens in our world a lot today. And people, men and women, disrespect God in many different ways. When I was a child, I would always hear people saying God and another word. And my father turned to me one day and said, that is not God's last name. So it's been going on since the early Bible ages that people just disrespect God in many different ways. And using his name in vain is one of the most popular. But you figure at some point, God may get tired of people disrespecting who he is and his name in general. And he can, without even blinking, just wipe you out. That's what he did with both King Nebuchadnezzar and with King Belshazzar. So we need to think before we speak, and don't put God's name in nonsense. I mean, people do it all the time. They say, I swear to God. But the scriptures tell us, don't swear about anything. So we have a lot to think about and correct in ourselves so that we don't end up in the fate of those kings.
That's so true. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. Amen. All right, we got a few more minutes here. We're a little bit early tonight. A few more minutes. Mike, were you raising your hand or were you stretching? I guess you were stretching. Anybody else love to hear your comments? No, we can finish a little early, that's okay, but if anyone has something to say, I'd love to hear it. Daniel chapter 5. Or we could just pass the mic around and... No. Yeah, there's lots of themes in here. I mean, the big theme, right? Don't mess with God. You know, respect God, worship God, and we all know that. But we're reminded every knee will bow, right, before God. We're reminded that God is sovereign. God is in control. And even if it seems like somebody's really powerful and influential, they're nothing for God. You know, even if it seems like there's a bad king, a bad ruler, a bad president, God's still in control. And he will control their destiny, right? And so as Christians, we can place our faith in God. You know, we don't place our faith in people, we place our faith in God. Daniel seemed like he could have cared less about Belshazzar, right? Even though he was king. He kind of just told Belshazzar, hey, God is God, you are not. That's the kind of faith that we should have. To know how big our God is. To know how big our God is, to know how sovereign our God is, how in control our God is. And that's by the way, that's a theme we see all throughout the book of Daniel, every chapter. God is in control. God is in control. God is in control. Oh yeah, we got a comment over here.
you saying that Daniel was politically incorrect in the way he addressed Belshazzar?
Definitely. Seems like it, right? Seems like it.
Well, he certainly wasn't. He wasn't living in our day, was he? To address someone of such prestige and nobility and the king in the words that he used, as if he said, "Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
You are not God."
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so it's amazing how we walk around on eggshells and fail to address the issue of the day with directness. I remember my first meeting with who was then our new pastor, Dr. Luther, and I had joined his staff, and he asked me a question, and boy, did I go around the bush. And he pulled me up short and said, "Now, what really do you think?" Well, Daniel wasn't asked what he thought. He just said it without fear of reprisal, fear of death. He'd already been there. And my favorite theme that I like to spout off about is the fact that we are dead people. If we recognize that we've been crucified with Christ, nevertheless we live, yet not I, but it is the Christ who lives in me. In the life I now live, I live by the power of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me.
You were handing Marlene the mic to speak, though, right? Okay, yeah. Thank you. That's. Oh. Good words, though. That's so true. That's a good application, you know. Daniel, well, the first one you said. Right, no. The first one you said. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. You know, we walk on eggshells too much. We should know what we believe and be able to speak it, right? That's good. That's good. Let's be more like Daniel. Daniel didn't fear the king. Daniel feared God, and that should be our perspective. All right. Well, Lolita, would you like to close us in prayer tonight?
All right. Lord, be with everyone in this room tonight as we continue to go through our daily lives. Let everyone know that they should no longer walk on eggshells. They should be more like Daniel. They should speak up with courage and not hide behind our shadow. Lord, tell everyone today, even everyone who is not in this room, to be there and step up and don't hide behind. I'd like you, Lord, to be with my family as we're going on our trip, and we're planning to come back at the end of this month, and that's the plan, and we don't want to delay it. And make sure we don't get hurt on the journey, and we stay healthy on the journey. And I'd like to give your hand to Lolita's family as she's going through, her husband's going through many issues, and I hope that he gets healthy one day and has no issues. And I hope everyone has a blessed week throughout the day and is touched by God's healing hand. Amen.